Welcome to the Blueprints from the Frontier. This is the official podcast of the International Space Alliance. ESA is a nonprofit proudly part of the Google for Nonprofits program, and we are accelerating innovation in space and frontier technology by supporting visionary founders, building ecosystems, and unlocking new opportunities for humanity, from Earth to orbit and beyond. I'm your host, I'm Joaquín Paz, and in every episode, we go inside the minds of those building the future, founders, engineers, and ecosystem leaders who are reshaping how we live, build, and explore. In today's episode, we have an amazing guest. We are going to be learning about how to build decentralized space computing platforms, why satellites hold the key to real-time climate resilience, what it's really like to fundraise in deep tech and the pre-seed stage, and also some of the founder lessons from Rama and how what he wishes someone told him earlier. My guest today is Rama Afullo, co-founder and CEO of Satlyt, a startup using edge computing and AI to connect satellites in space and turn raw satellite data into actionable insights for industries like agriculture, insurance, and climate risk. Rama is a space systems and mechanical engineer at Google, Tesla, and SpaceX alum, and one of the few founders building not just from Earth up, but also from orbit in. So let's dive in. Rama, nice to meet you. Great to have you here.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. Great intro. Appreciate it, Joaquin.
Thank you. So let's start with kind of your origin story. That's some of the things that people always like to hear. What led you to build Satlyt?
I think it's an amalgamation of a lot of different things that have happened throughout my life, right? So, through my life, so I'm Kenyan born. I've lived in 6 countries. Lived in 3 countries in Africa, 2 in Europe, and been living in the US for the last 3.5 years. And I think through all of that, I've had a multitude of different experiences, right? Now, if you look at what Satellite is, what we're doing is we're networking satellites in orbit, right? And creating managed services for satellite operators in space, right? As well as creating ways to sort of like make sense and make a business out of the downstream data applications, right? So through my life, through my time at Tesla, I actually pivoted Tesla's business model at the time was in the energy products division. If anyone knows the Tesla Powerwall, and they were focused on the residential market in Africa. And I pivoted their business to focus on the small commercial market and in particularly to focus on the telecommunications market and replace diesel gensets and lead acid batteries with Tesla lithium-ion battery cells, right? And that is like where it begins because then I start to really understand sort of the telecommunications industry. Then when I was at Google, I worked in Google Ads, then eventually was in cloud engineering at Google. And when I was at cloud engineering, I got to see sort of the power of cloud computing, what you could do as a cloud architect, how you could work with a bunch of different folks. And some of my clients were Snowflake, GitLab, and Twitter. So I was very lucky to have some clients that were super like robust in terms of their approach to the cloud computing industry. And Snowflake in particular, being sort of frenemies with all the large cloud service providers, was like another model that I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And it was during this time that I actually pitched at a conference, the New Space Africa conference, where they were asking for folks for ideas of space startups. Like if there were 5 people who wanted to pitch, I decided to put together a pitch deck and actually just showed it to my team today for the first time because I'll be going to that same conference, this time being held in Egypt. It was held in Nairobi, in Kenya, the first time. And I sort of showed the team the pitch that I had. I have the video, I have the pitch deck, I have everything from 3 years ago. And that's really where the genesis of this began. And then finally, I thought, okay, if I want to start a space company, I have to be absolutely sure. And if I go to SpaceX and take a look, if they're doing something I find really, really interesting, I'll stay. If not, I'll go build my own business. And I think I've got a better shot as an ex-SpaceX engineer than if I'm not, right? Or as an ex-SpaceX product manager. So at the time, I was also pursuing a master's in space systems engineering at the Johns Hopkins University. Decided to drop out of that to join SpaceX because I got my green card and thought, okay, let's go see this. Joined SpaceX, wasn't particularly enthusiastic about all the
Mm.
things that were going on there at the time. I mean, great teams, but I wasn't very motivated by it. So I decided to quit SpaceX 3 months in, and I incorporated my startup the exact same day that I left SpaceX, which was 9th of July last year, right?
Awesome.
And one more piece of law there is that I actually bought the domain, the original domain for Satlyt for the business, satlyt.com, I think at the time, but we use the .ai as our default right now. I bought that 9 years ago, right? Even
Wow.
before uh, like as I was starting my time at Tesla, I had a feeling I would build a space tech startup at some point in the
Mm.
future, and I had a feeling it would have to do with satellites. So that's really so when you pull these big things together and you pull sort of the background engineering, pull the Tesla telecom stuff, the cloud stuff at Google, and
Mhm.
also startups in AI at Google, and then finally the SpaceX being a product manager for Starlink. Pull them all together, I think it creates a
Mhm.
perfect recipe for exactly what we're building.
Rama, a few things that I want to highlight. I've seen a lot of startup websites. Something that really stood out for me from your website is that you have your story right there.
Yep.
You know, that line, that timeline of how everything came together is really interesting. I haven't seen that before, so I invite people to go on your website that I'm going to leave later on the comments so for them they can go. And also something I read recently, congratulations on going into the finalists, right, of the Snowflake uh, challenge. So great.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Just going off script a little bit.
Yeah, no, no problem. I think Snowflake, like I mentioned, it's like a full circle moment for me because I used to be their technical solutions consultant on behalf of Google Cloud. And now they're recognizing my startup as one of the top 10 startups out of thousands and thousands of startups that applied the business end for the Snowflake Startup Challenge. So they've announced it on their official website. We're in the final
That's
10.
amazing.
We'll find out the next week or so if we're in the final three, and we'll be pitching
Wow.
on stage at that point. But when the final 10 has been announced, it's official that our startup is one of 10 startups that Snowflake sees to have the most aptitude to build a significant business on the Snowflake stack, which is really just a distribution of a whole bunch of other sort of data warehouses and sort of cloud computing stacks across the large cloud service providers. So uh, really
So
like
cool.
Snowflake, love their journey, love what we're doing there, and fingers crossed we'll find out this week or next about whether or not we're in the final three.
That's so amazing. Rama, let's go a little bit more into your company, right?
So,
What is different? What are you offering that is different in the space, other ecosystem of startups, in deep tech, in AI? What do you think is your main
yeah,
edge?
yeah. So I think the first thing is that a lot of folks in space talk about interoperability. Not enough folks do actually do something about interoperability. And what we mean by that is being able to have satellites be, in any spacecraft really, be able to cross communicate with other satellites. Right now, believe it or not, most satellites are built pointing down. So they don't have the ability to cross link. They can send data up to the satellite from the ground here on Earth and send the data down from the satellite back down, and a good chunk of that data is lost. Like it can be up to
Hmm.
99.9% of the data is lost or is useless, right?
Wow.
So we're trying to figure out ways to create sort of this inter-satellite network um, where folks can be networked with each other. They can cross-link. They can monetize the excess computational capacity up in orbit, right? And that actually is a big deal for them because they can also use each other as relays. If there's cloud cover that's stopping you from being able to send your data down, you can send that data over to another satellite for it to send that data down on your behalf,
Mm.
right? Relay. You can do so many other things. You can train AI in space if you wish, right? You can federate satellite systems, right? And federate sort of different ways for you to work with these satellites. But what's even more unique in terms of what we're doing is we can think of that system of monetizing the excess resources as Airbnb for space compute. But below that, downstream of that, we can then take this access to data and we can create apps, real-time apps, applications. So, for example, right now we've created our own application off of that. So, we're
Hmm.
practicing what we preach. It's called
Yeah.
AgriSat, where we can use predictive analytics, right, that we get from this inter-satellite network, um, and use that for crop yield, right, or for any sort of predictive analytics and AI inference, using AI inference for folks in the agricultural space, right, and that's taking off, right, as well. So I think what we end up doing is creating an open ecosystem, right, that's horizontally integrated and anyone can play into, versus the current idea of always creating a closed ecosystem, vertically integrated, doing everything yourselves, right? So that's our
That's
idea.
amazing. That's so cool. Brahma, just top of mind, just thinking about you mentioned, how do you think these big players like the hyperscalers, the Googles, the Amazon, right? Do you think they're gonna compete anytime with these type
Yeah.
of technologies? What do you think?
Well, we're hoping to partner with all of them, right?
Yeah.
We don't necessarily see them as competition, to be honest. For me, anyone who's building anything to do with data centers here on Earth or in space can be a node in our ecosystem, right? That's the beauty of us being a software first model, right? Is that we can ingest basically anyone, hardware, software. We can ingest you into our overall ecosystem. We've got a containerized module that can do that, right? And folks would actually benefit from it. So I think first mover advantage is super helpful in that regard, right? That said,
Mhm.
I mean, AWS definitely have their own data centers and space plans. They've actually demonstrated a data center in space, I believe, with deOrbit a couple of years ago. So that's a thing that they've done, and they're about to start launching their Project Kuiper, which is their the competitor to SpaceX's Starlink
Mm.
constellation of satellites. So they're about to launch 29 satellites. They're supposed to launch it last week. We'll see. But the fact that they're ready is a good sign. And of course, since they've got Jeff Bezos both on the Blue Origin side and on Amazon, I
Mhm.
imagine they're getting a pretty good deal on launch, or maybe not a good deal at all. I don't know. They probably find a
Yeah.
way to make this work, right? Um, but yeah, so overall for them. I think Amazon has shown, especially with their ground station product, that they have the biggest aptitude to try and to make something real for the space community, and they actually cultivate space startups, AWS Space.
Mm.
I was part of a team trying to push for Google Space internally when I was at Google. All right. I hope that really comes into fruition. I mean, Google has now partnered with the aerospace company to do some weather sort of downstream data AI plays for climate. And that's great,
Mm.
right? They're starting to actually be vocal about the stuff they want to do in space. They've had opportunities to do it before. They bought Skybox and then sold it to Planet, right? They should have, I think, gone further with that. But they could easily become a player if they take it very seriously. And then Microsoft Azure Space is also a real thing, although I don't think they cultivate folks the same way Amazon does, right? I think Amazon's really good at like diving into the startup ecosystem and diving in with people. And I think Google's gotten really good at that also. And I'm not seeing enough from Microsoft. That said,
Mm.
there's a bunch of the incumbents who definitely would want to play in this eventually, right? But it's the same story every time. The incumbents
Mm.
have too many things going on. What is their focus? Little old me comes in, right, and eats their lunch a little bit. So we'll see how it goes.
Mhm. Disrupt the ecosystem. Um,
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about, and I read this analogy, Rama, in on LinkedIn a few days ago. It's the heat-seeking missile for pain, right? It was this analogy from Sequoia that the best technologies, the best PMs out there are always looking for the burning pain of the market, because when the market has that burning pain available, the market will listen, right? What do you think is that burning pain that you're trying to solve? I remember we talked
Yeah.
about, it's something that really for me was eye opening. It's much maybe better, faster, I don't know if it's cheaper, but to process data in space than taking it down
Yeah.
and back up, right? Can you maybe speak a little
Exactly.
more on that as well?
No, so that's exactly it, right? Um, right now, folks will try to send all their data down immediately, right? So if you think about if my hand is planet Earth, right, and each finger represents a satellite. Um, if you are so satellites in low Earth orbit, which is between 160 to 1,000 kilometers, I believe, above the Earth's surface, it takes you about 90 minutes to go through one revolution of the Earth, right? So from this point to that point. And we can imagine that this is a ground station. You're going to be downlinking. So my knuckles are that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have about a 10-minute window where you've got a field of view of this ground station where you can downlink your data, which is to send that data down from the satellite down to Earth, right? Within that, if there is cloud cover, electromagnetic interference, rain propagation, a whole bunch of other things, right? Your data might not actually go through to this ground station because there'll be sort of something interfering from that with that data. And most satellites are built to size. They're built to the mission. So they will just override that data on the next pass. Or maybe they've got two or three ability to sort of store two or three passes of that data. And it also costs you money to downlink that data with these different ground stations. So you don't want to interlink with too many different ground stations, it ends up costing you money, right?
Mm.
So if you had another satellite next to you as you're passing by, right? You could send that data over to this satellite, which has a better field of view of this ground station. Perhaps the cloud cover has surpassed over the last 10 minutes. You can send that data over to it. Now, that still doesn't solve the problem of the fact that you're sending maybe too much data and a lot of the data is useless, right?
No.
Now we get to the point where we're like, well, what could we do if we actually had the technology across all of these satellites? Let's say now we've got these 5 satellites hovering around quite close to each other, relatively speaking. Why don't we network all of them so they all have access to this data in real time and they can sift through the data right then and there and post-process it and delete, like, let's say every photo, every Earth observation image from that one satellite that has cloud cover. Maybe 90% of it has cloud cover. So that image is going to be useless. And only keep that 10% of data, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's useful, right? Do all of that and then also act as a relay and send that data down, right? I think
Wow.
that then gets super interesting, right? So that's like, that's the, I mean, I just got off of a phone call, one of the
Mm.
veterans of the space industry, right? One of the first employees of SpaceX uh, was helped do a lot of things in the space industry already and is building out his own startup. And he was like 99.9% of data coming from satellites are useless,
Wow.
right? So if you can
So you
sift through all of
so
it,
interesting. Mm-hmm.
exactly. If you can sift through all of it, get rid of that and get that 0.1%, that is gold, right? That saves time. That saves like a whole bunch of data analytics happening down the ground on useless data. It saves so much money, and saves people from service level agreements that could be millions and millions of dollars. So all around it's a winner.
Oh my God. So interesting, Rama. Um, let's go now to a little bit of the founder playbook that I think
Sure.
everyone is also very interesting because this space is interesting because it's different, right? It's not the consumer playbook, it's not the B2B playbook as it is, right? It's a different type of playbook. And that's why this podcast is all about. It's understanding your learnings from building on the frontier of space. What has
Sure.
been the most challenging moment so far in your journey, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I think honestly, every single day has very high highs and very low lows. And if you let it, you can actually sink into the lows much more than you can let the highs take you up, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that's like everyone talks about it, but genuinely, founding a company can be depressing, right?
Hmm.
It can get you. I've been doing this for the last 9 months now, right? There's times when we didn't know whether or not we actually have money for the business. There's disputes with different folks wanting you to go in a different direction. There's
Hmm.
having to let people go from your business. There's thinking for sure that you've got something you've applied for lockdown and everything's going to be great, and then you get rejected, and
Hmm.
then your biggest competitor gets it, even though they're not a fit. They just happen to have raised more money than you, and that gives them more access. Like that happens a lot,
Hmm.
right? And this isn't like unique to my experience. It's unique to everyone's experience. I think it's it's very challenging on a daily basis because, like, for example, today's tax day, right? I
Yeah.
just had to file a P&L properly for the first time in my life last night, right? And pull that together. But at the same time, I'm also HR. I'm also making sure everyone's getting paid. I'm also trying to move the business forward. At the same time, I'm fundraising. At the same time, I'm technical. So I'm trying to sort of give sort of technical feedback on the tools, but then also starting to worry that, hey, maybe I'm not uh, diving deeply enough on the technical side because I've got a head of engineering who's great, right? But then where do I lose my grip? I think one of the
Yeah.
big things was I read this book a few years ago called The Founder's Dilemmas. And that was probably one of the best books I've read on the startup ecosystem. And that saved me a few times already, right? And
Hmm.
it sort of helps you think about your motivations. And if you're motivated by control, by wealth, it's not that one will take preference over the other. You just need to know what motivates you because you can still be wealthy and then go for control or vice versa. And I know for me, it's definitely about control of my own destiny, right?
Hmm.
Control of where I can go, control of the impact that the business can have. Like that's what I really have always wanted throughout my career. And I think that's one of the things that helped me overcome a lot of the issues.
That's very interesting. I'm gonna leave that book recommendation also below because it sounds very, very useful. What would you say that from Google, Tesla, SpaceX? Can you name a few learnings that you got from working in, let's say, big
Yep.
tech that can really be helpful for you today?
Well, I learned at Tesla and SpaceX that companies can be successful while ignoring their CEO. Uh, I've also learned from Google that your CEO does not have to be shouting from the rooftops and making everyone feel inadequate in order for them to be effective. Like the Google CEO is Sundar Pichai is very different to Elon, right?
Hmm.
Very measured, calm, isn't the shouty type, but still has grown the business significantly, has had a significant impact, and is an immigrant himself, right?
Uh-huh.
I think, yeah, I think I've learned a lot about leadership styles because like when I joined Google, all I knew was Tesla. That's the only place I'd ever worked. So I just thought
Uh-huh.
that's how things are. And at least I got to know that things aren't like that. But at the same time, I've also learned the value of I think one of the big things that I learned was you can be an entrepreneur internally at any of these organizations, right? Um,
Mm.
and it helps you a lot, right? So a lot of folks don't see the gap, so they stick to whatever their job description is. And I've never been one to do that, right? Ever,
Uh-huh.
right? I do my job, but then I do the 50% extra that I think will be super impactful and is actually interesting to me. Like at
Uh-huh.
Tesla, the pivot to the telecommunications vertical, I did not have to do that, right? But I found it super interesting, and I thought there was a better business case, and we're getting $100 million a year deals like being offered to us, right? For folks to buy power walls for their base stations. And then you end up finding yourself on site in Nigeria or in I came here to the Bay Area with that as well, like, working with clients.
Uh-huh.
Even at Google, like Google's Africa apps business, like I just took that as what they call at Google a 20% project and just built it out and did something I think that was really cool with that and grew that business significantly. And it's just, I mean, I can keep telling the story. Like Google also worked with Y Combinator, created the Y Combinator deal between Google and YC, whereas before
Mm.
YC didn't take Google seriously at all, right? Like they were
Hmm.
focused on AWS. Um, but and this just keeps going on, right? Even at my time at SpaceX, which I can't talk about too much, but
Uh-huh.
the common theme is that you can have an impact internally at these organizations and be an entrepreneur with it, right? Especially the big tech companies. I think in the past more so than now, I think they're starting to just get everyone focused on their job and only their job, right? Almost mechanically so, right? But there's still avenues for that. So the only person holding you back is you, and maybe a terrible manager or two, but uh, like if you've got a really bad manager and you're doing a job you don't enjoy, do your best to get the hell out of that job and shift jobs as
Hmm.
well. I did it enough times myself when I had a really bad manager. I'd just make my case and then keep it moving.
So useful, very tactical and useful for the audience. Let's talk now about what's next for Satlyt. Rama, what do you see the next 12 months, 18 months, and what's your long-term vision for the company?
Um, I think we need to get flight heritage ASAP and be live on some live satellites in orbit. All right. So I think that's maybe the next thing for us as well. I mean, we're deploying one of our own apps. So that's clearly in the very short term, like something we want to do this month. Um, but be live on some satellites in the next within this quarter, right? That would be great. Start working with folks who are like putting up their own satellites to help them network with each other. Like, we want to do that this year. We've raised a pre-seed round. Probably going to raise a seed round in the next 3 to 6 months. We'll
Mhm.
see. Continue to grow the team, but in a much more measured way. Hire slow, fire fast, right?
Mm.
It's the brutal nature of things, but I don't know. I fear it's hardening me way beyond where I want it to be, right? But it's
Mm.
hard to not be when you're thinking, when you can see sort of the bird's eye view of what's going on in the organization, right? And you've got a specific goal. But yeah, within 12 to 18 months, yeah, we'll go for it. We'll go for the money, right? We want to make a
So,
dent in the space universe.
Rama, as an ex-Googler as myself, something that you mentioned is about respecting the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to take the hard decisions into consideration, but that's the opportunity, and how do you respect it
Yes.
for your own service? Okay, so last part of this episode is about the quick fire round. I'm just gonna
Sure.
ask you a few questions, and then you can give me your answer. First
Yeah.
thing, a founder or leader that you admire.
Uh, my father. My father's a leader. He's retired, did his PhD in electrical engineering and multi-access protocols, and very brilliant man, and is an advisor to our company. Admire him very much.
So
Professor
cool.
Thomas Afullo.
So
Yes.
cool. Your favorite space or sci-fi movie?
I'd probably lean towards a Ferris Space book, actually. Rendezvous with Rama. I know. Yeah, that's my name. But what's interesting about it is by Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey. And what's interesting about it is that I didn't know about it until 2 years ago, and I thought it's always so strange. No one had told me one of the most famous space books ever was about an alien spaceship named Rama, right?
Wow.
And I didn't know that. So I want to name my office, like when we finally move into a physical space, I want to call my physical office space, like from my office, Rendezvous
Mhm.
with Rama. Yes.
So cool. So cool. Very nice story. Um, what do you think is the most underrated tool that you use on a daily basis?
Uh, I say Google Workspace suite, right, is just brilliant. Like, for anyone who's used Google Workspace or like used Google Docs and Google Calendar and Gmail and seen how everything works well, how everyone can cross collaborate on a document. So like anyone who's used it and then gone to an organization that doesn't use it,
Hmm.
oh my God. So it was baptism by fire to go over to SpaceX and see people emailing each other the latest version of a deck of a PowerPoint
Hmm.
presentation, and then trying to use SharePoint and everything's breaking. Oh my word! So that is Google
Wow.
Workspace. They're not paying me
It
to say that.
works.
You should. Amazing,
They
amazing.
definitely should. At least some credits.
Yeah, yeah. More credits, please. Yes.
More credits, more credits. Um, one moonshot idea that you wish more people were building,
Hmm. I wish more people were building.
or maybe not an idea. It could be an industry or.
I think with all this uh, talk of immigration and othering everyone else, I wish people were building the means for folks to see beyond that, right? And to actually just like I don't know. Like, I guess it's a more of a political tool or something. A tool that really like helps us to be absolutely clear about what is our emotions, what is our facts, what are the facts, and be super regimented on that, right? And be able to do this across borders, right, as well, right? Yeah, just something that truly brings people together because I think right now a lot of the tools that we're building are built for division.
Amazing. And then your company's mission in one sentence.
To Our mission is to create space interoperability.
So cool. Okay, Rama, because this is the first episode, I want to do an exercise of something that I saw in another podcast that I really like. And
Sure.
is that without knowing the next guest, what question would you like that next guest to answer?
Are all the guest founders?
Yes, founders.
Which job do you regret leaving the most?
Very nice, very nice. Okay, so cool. Well, Rama, thank you so much. Thank you for being the first guest on Blueprints from the Frontier. Your clarity, your vision, your systems approach, and your willingness to solve hard problems with elegance and scale. That's exactly what this podcast is here to spotlight. To all our listeners, if you're inspired by what you heard and want to follow the work we're doing at the International Space Alliance, check out our website. I'm going to put it below. From founder support to global collaboration, we're building the ecosystem for what's next on the space ecosystem. And if this episode sparked something in you, send it to a friend, tag us, and let us know what your blueprint for the future looks like. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous in pursuit of the next frontier. Thank you so much.
Thank you.